My name is Theodore Morrison, though most people call me Ted, and at 73 years old, I've learned that the sweetest revenge is served not cold, but with a smile that never wavers. This is the story of how I taught my daughter-in-law's mother a lesson she'll never forget, and perhaps saved my son's marriage in the process. It was a Friday evening in late August when I decided to drive down to my beach house in Montauk. The 3-hour drive from Manhattan usually cleared my head, and after a particularly grueling week of board meetings, yes, I still work, much to everyone's surprise, I needed the sound of waves more than another night in my empty penthouse. Margaret, my wife of 48 years, had passed 2 years ago, and the city apartment still echoed with her absence. The beach house was my sanctuary. I'd bought it 35 years ago, when beachfront property in Montauk was still attainable for someone who'd worked their way up from nothing. It was a sprawling 3-story colonial with weathered cedar shingles, white trim that needed constant maintenance against the salt air, and a wraparound porch that Margaret had filled with rocking chairs and wind chimes. The house sat on 2 acres of prime beachfront, worth more now than I'd ever imagined when I signed those papers with shaking hands, wondering if I was overextending myself. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. Why should I? It was my house, my name on the deed, my mortgage payments for 15 years until I'd paid it off early with a bonus from a particularly good year. My son James knew he was welcome any time, of course. I'd given him and his wife Victoria a key 3 years ago when they married, told them to use it whenever they wanted. I believed in sharing good fortune with family, a philosophy that, as you'll see, was about to be tested. The sun was setting as I pulled my Mercedes into the driveway, painting the sky in shades of coral and purple that Margaret would have made me stop to admire. I noticed James's Tesla already there, which made me smile. Good, I thought, we could have breakfast together tomorrow, maybe take the boat out if the weather held. I'd been trying to reconnect with him lately. Our relationship had grown strained since he'd married Victoria. Not because I disliked her, she was accomplished, beautiful, a corporate lawyer like him, but something about her seemed to diminish him, made him smaller somehow. I grabbed my weekend bag from the trunk, noting 2 other cars I didn't recognize, a white Lexus and a red BMW convertible. Friends of theirs, probably. James had always been social, unlike his old man. I used the front door, not wanting to surprise anyone through the back patio where they were likely enjoying the evening. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was off. My furniture had been rearranged. The leather armchair where I read every morning, positioned perfectly to catch the sunrise over the ocean, had been moved to a corner. The coffee table, an antique driftwood piece Margaret had found at an estate sale, was pushed against the wall. In their place sat new furniture I didn't recognize, a gaudy glass table, chairs that looked like they belonged in a nightclub rather than a beach house. Before I could process this, a woman's voice shrieked from the living room. "What's this lazy old man doing here?" I turned to find a woman in her 60s, dressed in designer clothing that screamed new money, pointing at me like I was a burglar. Her face was tight with surgical enhancement, her blonde hair too bright to be natural, her nails too long to be practical. This, I would soon learn, was Vivian Blackstone, Victoria's mother. James appeared behind her, his face draining of color when he saw me. "Dad?" We didn't expect you." "Clearly," I said, keeping my voice even, though inside, something was boiling. I looked at Vivian, who was still glaring at me with undisguised contempt. "I'm Ted Morrison. I own this house." "And you are?" She sniffed, lifting her chin. "I'm Vivian Blackstone, Victoria's mother. And as far as I'm concerned, this is my daughter's house now, which makes it mine to use as I please." I felt my eyebrows rise. "Is that so?" Victoria appeared then, dressed in a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's rent. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Ted, we weren't expecting you. We're having a little gathering this weekend. Mother invited some friends from her country club to my house," I said, still maintaining that even tone that I'd perfected in 40 years of business negotiations. "Without asking." Vivian waved a dismissive hand, her diamonds catching the light. "Oh, please." James said we could use it. What difference does it make? You're hardly ever here anyway, rattling around in that big city apartment all alone. At your age, you should be in a retirement community, not pretending you're still relevant. The room went silent. James opened his mouth, then closed it, looking at his feet like he was 12 years old again and had broken a window. Victoria touched his arm, a warning or perhaps encouragement to stay quiet. I wasn't sure which was worse. James, I said quietly, is this your opinion as well? He mumbled something noncommittal, still not meeting my eyes. That hurt more than Vivian's venom. This was my son, the boy I'd taught to swim in the ocean just beyond those windows, who I'd walked down this very beach with after his first heartbreak, who'd stood next to me at Margaret's funeral and held me when I broke. I see, I said. I smiled then, the smile I used in boardrooms when someone thought they'd outmaneuvered me. Well, don't let me interrupt your party. I'll just get a few things from my room. Your room is occupied, Vivian said smugly. My friends Richard and Diane Worthington are staying there. You can use the maid's quarters off the kitchen if you must stay. The maid's quarters. A cramped room with a single bed that we'd use for storage since we'd never had live-in help. In my own house. How thoughtful, I said, maintaining that smile. And I assume you've moved into the master suite? Naturally, she said. It has the best views. I don't know why James and Victoria were staying in that small room on the second floor. I set them straight about that immediately. The small room on the second floor had been James's childhood bedroom, kept exactly as it was when he left for college, with his trophies and photos still on the shelves. They'd been staying there out of nostalgia or respect, and this woman had set them straight. I looked at my son one more time. James, do you have anything to say? He shifted uncomfortably. Dad, maybe it would be better if you came back another weekend. You know how Vivian is. It's just easier. Easier, I repeated. I see. I picked up my bag and headed toward the kitchen, toward those maids' quarters. Behind me, I heard Vivian's triumphant voice. That's what's wrong with his generation. No fight left in them. Just old men who don't know when to step aside. Victoria giggled, actually giggled. And James? James said nothing. I closed the door to the tiny room behind me, set down my bag, and pulled out my phone. The smile never left my face. They wanted to play games with ownership and respect? Fine. I'd spent 40 years building a business empire from nothing, navigating corporate sharks that would eat Vivian Blackstone for breakfast. She thought I was a lazy old man with no fight left? She was about to learn why, at 73, I still had a seat on 3 Fortune 500 boards and a reputation that made grown executives sweat. I didn't sleep that night, but not because of the uncomfortable bed or the musty smell of the storage room. I was planning. People like Vivian Blackstone operated on assumptions. That wealth meant class, that age meant weakness, that silence meant submission. She'd made 3 critical errors in our first encounter. She'd revealed her character, she'd shown her weaknesses, and she'd underestimated her opponent. At 3 a.m., I made my first call to Robert Chin, my private investigator in Manhattan. Robert never asked why I needed information at ungodly hours. He just delivered. Ted? Everything all right? His voice was alert despite the hour. I need a full background on Vivian Blackstone. Financial, social, legal. Everything. Priority 1. Timeline? Yesterday. Also, I need you to contact Martha at the Times, Jennifer at the Wall Street Journal, and that blogger who covers Hampton's Society. What's his name? Derek Ashworth. He runs Hampton's Elite. That's the one. Tell them Theodore Morrison has a story that might interest them, but they need to be in Montauk by tomorrow evening. Discreetly. Consider it done. My second call was to my lawyer, Benjamin Kraft. Ben had been with me for 20 years and had seen me through acquisitions, Margaret's estate, and countless contracts. More importantly, he was a shark who enjoyed the hunt as much as the kill. Ben, I need you to pull the deed and all associated documentation for the Montauk property. Also, draft an eviction notice and research New York state laws on trespassing, property damage, and theft. Ted, what's going on? Someone's forgotten who owns what. I'm about to remind them. My third call was to Maria, who'd managed properties in the Hamptons for 30 years and knew everyone worth knowing. Maria, it's Ted Morrison. I need the best catering team, bartenders, and event staff you have available for tomorrow night. Price is no object. Mr. Morrison, that's very short notice. I'll triple the usual rate. Then consider it done. How many guests? Let's say 50. And Maria? Make sure your team knows they work for me, not anyone currently in the house. By sunrise, I was sitting on the small deck outside the maid's quarters with my laptop, coffee I'd made in the forgotten coffee maker in the storage room, and a plan that would make Machiavelli proud. The ocean was calm, the beach empty except for a few early morning joggers. I could hear movement in the main house, Vivian's shrill voice directing someone about breakfast arrangements. James found me there at 7. He looked haggard, his hair uncombed, wearing yesterday's clothes. Dad, I'm sorry about last night. I held up a hand. James, do you know what your mother loved most about this house? He blinked at the non sequitur. The sunrise from the master bedroom? No. She loved that it was a place where you could be yourself. No pretense, no performance. Just family. I looked at him steadily. When did you stop being yourself? His face reddened. Dad, you don't understand. Vivian is difficult. It's easier to just let her take over my house. Rearrange my furniture? Insult me in my own home while you stand there like a mute? She's Victoria's mother. And I'm your father. Which relationship did you choose to honor last night? He had no answer for that. By noon, Robert had sent me a preliminary report that made for fascinating reading. Vivian Blackstone, née Vivian Pratt, had married and divorced 3 times, each marriage ending with a larger settlement than the last. Her current wealth came from husband number 3, Harold Blackstone, a real estate developer who died 5 years ago under what the report called interesting circumstances. Nothing criminal, but enough irregularities that his children from his first marriage were still contesting the will. More interesting were her debts. Despite the facade of wealth, Vivian was leveraged to the hilt, multiple mortgages, credit lines maxed out, living on borrowed time and other people's money. The country club she'd mentioned? 3 months behind on dues. The Lexus in my driveway? Leased, and 2 payments overdue. She was a house of cards, and I was about to be the wind. Victoria found me in the afternoon, as I sat in the garden reading, or pretending to. She approached cautiously, like someone approaching a lion they just realized wasn't as tame as they thought. Ted, she began. Mother doesn't mean anything by it. She's just protective. Protective? I set down my book. Of what, exactly? Of a house she doesn't own. Of a fortune she doesn't have? Victoria's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, my dear daughter-in-law, that your mother is broke. Broke and desperate, and using my house to maintain an illusion for her country club friends. Did you know about her financial situation? The shock on her face was genuine. That's impossible. She has Harold's money. Had. Past tense. Your mother has the spending habits of a Vanderbilt, and the income of a substitute teacher. I stood, brushing off my pants. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations to make for this evening. This evening? Oh, didn't your mother tell you? She's invited quite a crowd for tonight. The Worthingtons, the Ashfords, the Pembertos, about 20 of her closest friends. Plus, I've taken the liberty of inviting a few people of my own. Victoria paled. Ted, what are you planning? Planning? Why would I plan anything? I'm just a lazy old man who doesn't know when to step aside, remember? I walked past her toward the house, where the catering vans were just beginning to arrive. Maria's team was nothing if not efficient. They swept in like a well-trained army, ignoring Vivian's shrieked protests and demands to know who they were. "We work for Mr. Morrison, ma'am," the head caterer said politely but firmly. "If you have concerns, please take them up with him." Vivian stormed out to find me directing the placement of tables on the lawn. "What is the meaning of this? I've already arranged catering." "Cancel it," I said pleasantly. "This is my house, and I'll handle the arrangements for any parties thrown here." "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to move your gathering elsewhere?" she spluttered, her face turning an alarming shade of red beneath her makeup. James agreed. "James doesn't own this house." "I do. Now you're welcome to stay for the party, of course. All of your friends are. In fact, I insist on it." Something in my tone must have warned her, because she took a step back. "What are you up to?" "Up to? I'm 73 years old, Vivian. What could I possibly be up to?" The afternoon was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every time Vivian tried to assert control, she found herself outmaneuvered. She told the bartenders where to set up, I redirected them to a better location. She tried to discuss the menu with the caterers. They politely informed her that Mr. Morrison had already approved everything. She attempted to rearrange the seating. My event coordinator, summoned by Maria, firmly but kindly explained that the arrangements were final. I could see her frustration building, but what could she do? Throw a tantrum in front of the staff? Storm out and lose face with her friends who were already on their way? She was trapped by her own pretensions. James tried once more to intercede. "Dad, this is getting out of hand. Can't you and Vivian just what? Coexist peacefully while she squats in my house and treats me like an unwelcome intruder?" "No, James. Your mother would be appalled at how you're handling this." The mention of Margaret hit home. His shoulders slumped. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to remember who you are. You're my son, yes, but you're also a man who once stood up to a corrupt supervisor, who testified in court against a major corporation, who protected a classmate from bullies even though it meant getting suspended. Where is that man?" "He got married," James said quietly, and for the first time, I heard resentment in his voice, not toward me, but toward his situation. "No," I corrected. "He got lost. But lost things can be found." By 5 o'clock, Vivian's guests began arriving. The Worthingtons, as pompous as expected. The Ashfords, new money trying desperately to appear old. The Pembertos, who actually had class and seemed uncomfortable with Vivian's grandiose tour of her beach house. I greeted each warmly, playing the gracious host, which clearly confused and unsettled Vivian. "So nice of you to visit my home," I said to each group, emphasizing the possession just enough to plant seeds of doubt. Derek Ashworth, the society blogger, arrived at 6, camera discreetly at his side. Martha from the Times and Jennifer from the Wall Street Journal came separately, both dressed to blend in with the crowd. They mingled, listened, observed. Robert Chin had driven out personally to deliver his final report, a thick folder that I placed prominently on the coffee table in the living room, marked Blackstone v. Confidential, in large red letters. I didn't open it, just left it there like a loaded gun on the mantel. Dinner was served at 7, an elaborate spread that put whatever Vivian had planned to shame. Lobster, prime rib, delicacies flown in from around the world. The wine alone was worth more than Vivian's overdue car payments. I made a toast, standing at the head of the table I'd paid for, in front of the house I'd built my life in. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Morrison family beach house. This home has been in my family for 35 years, a place where my late wife Margaret and I raised our son James, where we've celebrated victories and weathered storms. I'm delighted to share it with you tonight." The emphasis on ownership was subtle but clear. Several guests glanced at Vivian, who was trying to smile but looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I understand there's been some confusion about the ownership of this property," I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the lawn. "So I thought I'd take this opportunity to clear things up." I pulled out my phone and projected onto the white wall of the house. Yes, I'd had a projector set up that afternoon, a copy of the deed. My name, clear as day. As you can see, this property is solely in my name. It has never been transferred, sold, or gifted to anyone else. Any suggestion otherwise is, frankly, fraudulent. The word fraudulent hung in the air like a knife. Vivian stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous, Mrs. Blackstone, is your behavior since arriving at my home. I turned to address the crowd, many of whom were now filming with their phones. Society people love drama, as long as it wasn't their own. This woman arrived at my house uninvited, rearranged my furniture, commandeered my bedroom, and when I arrived, the legal owner, she called me a lazy old man and suggested I should be in a retirement home. Gasps from the crowd. The Pembertos looked genuinely shocked. Even the Worthingtons seemed embarrassed. Furthermore, I continued, picking up the red folder, I've discovered some interesting facts about Mrs. Blackstone that I think her friends should know, considering how many of them she's borrowed money from under false pretenses. Vivian's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? Let's see. Loans from Mrs. Ashford for a temporary cash flow problem that's lasted 3 years. Borrowed jewelry from Mrs. Worthington that was mysteriously lost and claimed on insurance. Should I continue? The gathered crowd was dead silent, but their phones were still recording. Derek Ashworth was practically glowing with glee. This was better than anything he'd published all year. Victoria grabbed her mother's arm. Mother, what is he talking about? Lies. All lies. Vivian shrieked, but her voice cracked. She looked around at her so-called friends, who were now avoiding her gaze, suddenly remembering their own loans and missing items. I haven't even gotten to the best part, I said, my voice still calm, conversational even. You see, Mrs. Blackstone has been telling people that she's investing in this property, that she's going to help transform it into a luxury rental that will make everyone rich. She's been taking deposits from interested parties. This was news even to Victoria, who stared at her mother in horror. Mother, you didn't. It was just a business opportunity. Vivian protested. The old man barely uses the place. The old man, I interrupted, uses this place plenty. And more importantly, the old man owns this place. Which makes what you've done fraud. Criminal fraud. I turned to the crowd. How many of you gave Mrs. Blackstone money for this supposed investment? 3 hands raised slowly. The Ashfords, looking furious. Mr. Pemberton, his face dark with anger. And surprisingly, Richard Worthington, who was glaring at Vivian with undisguised rage. Richard? His wife gasped. You gave her our money? She said it was a sure thing. He muttered. Said her son-in-law had inherited the property and needed investors to renovate. I looked at James, who had gone pale. James, did you tell anyone you'd inherited this house? No. God, no. I would never. He turned to Victoria. Did you know about this? Victoria was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. She said she was helping us. Said she was setting up our future. By stealing from my father? By defrauding our friends? James's voice rose, and for the first time in years, I saw the man I'd raised. Mother, Vivian, how could you? Vivian tried to rally. I was doing it for you too. You think your father was ever going to give you this place? He's probably leaving everything to charity, like all these rich old fools who forget their families. Actually, I said, pulling out another document, I had planned to leave this house to James and Victoria. It's been in my will for 3 years. But after tonight, I made a show of tearing up the document. It was just a copy, but the symbolism was clear. The crowd erupted. Vivian's friends were demanding their money back. The journalists were typing furiously on their phones. Derek Ashworth was practically dancing with joy at the society scandal of the year. But I wasn't done. I'm not a cruel man, I said, raising my voice over the chaos. So I'm going to give you a choice, Vivian. Option 1. You return every penny you've taken from these people by Monday morning. You leave my house tonight and never come back. You apologize to everyone here, including me, and we all pretend this was a misunderstanding. Or, she spat, trying to maintain some dignity. Or option 2, I call the police right now. I press charges for fraud, trespassing, theft. Yes, I know about the artwork you've been selling from the house, pieces you claimed were yours. You face criminal prosecution, certain conviction given the evidence, and probable jail time. I pulled out my phone. So what will it be? The silence was deafening. Vivian looked around desperately for support, but found none. Her friends had become her accusers. Her daughter was weeping with shame. And James had finally found his spine. Get out, he said to Vivian, his voice quiet but firm. Get out of my father's house. Get out of our lives. You've humiliated us, stolen from us, used us. We're done. Victoria, darling. Vivian reached for her daughter. Victoria stepped back. No. James is right. You've gone too far this time, Mother. You always go too far, and I always make excuses. Not anymore. Vivian's composure finally cracked completely. She aged 10 years in 10 seconds, her face crumbling as she realized she'd lost everything. Her scheme, her reputation, her daughter, her carefully constructed facade. I'll return the money, she whispered. Tonight, I said firmly. Wire transfers. Now. Ben here. Benjamin had arrived an hour ago, as planned. Will oversee the transactions. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of Vivian accessing accounts, liquidating assets, selling stocks at a loss, doing whatever it took to return the money she'd stolen. The Ashfords got their $30,000 back. The Pembertons their $50,000. Richard Worthington his $25,000. Each transfer was documented, witnessed, recorded. By the time it was over, Vivian was financially ruined but legally safe. She had just enough left for gas money and a motel room. Her Lexus would be repossessed within days. Her country club membership was already being revoked. Mrs. Ashford was on the board and had been texting furiously all evening. Your things will be packed and placed outside, I told her. You have 10 minutes to collect them and leave. If you're not gone by then, I call the police anyway. She left without another word, a broken woman who'd played a game she didn't understand against an opponent she'd gravely underestimated. After Vivian's departure, the party dissolved quickly. The society crowd scattered like roaches when lights came on, eager to spread the gossip but not to be associated with the scandal. Derek Ashworth promised me his article would be fair but honest. Code for devastating to Vivian but favorable to me. The Times and Wall Street Journal reporters had enough material for weeks. Soon, only family remained, James, Victoria, and me, sitting on the deck as the moon rose over the ocean. The same deck where Margaret and I had sat countless nights, planning our future, discussing James's troubles, dreaming of grandchildren. I'm sorry, James said finally. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have stood up to her from the beginning. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But more importantly, you should have stood up for yourself. When did you become so afraid of conflict that you'd let someone abuse your father in his own home? James was quiet for a long moment. When I married Victoria, Vivian made our lives hell every time we disagreed with her. It was easier to just give in. And you? I asked Victoria. Did you know what your mother was doing? Not the fraud, she said quickly. I swear I didn't know about that. But I knew she was difficult. I knew she was taking advantage. She's my mother. I thought family meant accepting people despite their flaws. Family, I said, means holding each other accountable because of love, not enabling destructive behavior out of fear. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the waves. The same waves that had witnessed James's first steps on this beach, his teenage heartbreaks, his wedding reception in this very yard. What happens now? Victoria asked. With the house, I mean. You tore up the will. I chuckled. I tore up a copy of an old will. The real one is safe in Ben's office. But it's being revised. James looked up sharply. You're cutting us out? No. I'm adding conditions. You'll still inherit this house, but only after proving you can stand up for it, and for yourselves. I want to see 6 months of therapy, couples and individual. I want to see you both setting boundaries with toxic people, even if they're family. I want to see you teaching your future children that respect is earned, not demanded, and that age brings wisdom, not irrelevance. Dad, James started. I'm not finished. I also want you here 1 weekend a month. Not as guests, but as family. Maintaining the property, yes, but also maintaining our relationship. Your mother's been gone 2 years, and before tonight I'd seen you twice. That changes now. Victoria wiped her eyes. We can do that. We want to do that. And your mother? I asked her. My mother made her choices. She'll have to live with the consequences. I'm done enabling her. I nodded, satisfied. Then I stood, my joints protesting after the long evening. I'm going to bed, in MY bedroom, in MY bed, in MY house. You two can stay in James's old room tonight. Tomorrow, we start fresh. As I walked inside, I heard James say to Victoria, "That's my father. The one I remember. The one I should have been defending all along." I smiled to myself. Vivian had called me a lazy old man with no fight left. She'd been wrong on all counts. I wasn't lazy. I'd orchestrated her complete destruction in less than 48 hours. I wasn't just an old man. I was a father, a businessman, a strategist. And the fight? The fight was what kept me young. But more importantly, I'd gotten my son back. I'd saved his marriage from a toxic influence. And I'd reclaimed not just my house, but my family's respect. Margaret would have been proud. Though knowing her, she would have handled it all with more grace and less drama. But then again, she always said I had a flair for the theatrical. I woke at sunrise, as I had for 50 years, but this morning felt different. The master bedroom was mine again, the furniture back in its proper place. James and Victoria had spent half the night moving things back after I'd gone to bed. Margaret's picture on the nightstand caught the first rays of sun, and I could almost hear her laughing at the whole affair. "You always did like a good show, Teddy," she would have said. Downstairs, I found Victoria already awake, making coffee in the kitchen. She jumped when she saw me, nearly dropping a mug. "Ted! I didn't expect you up so early." "Old habits," I said, accepting the coffee she offered. "Can't sleep past sunrise anymore. Body won't let me." She fidgeted with her own cup. "I need to tell you something. About my mother. Before." I sat at the kitchen table, my table, in its right place again. "Go on. She's done this before. Not the fraud, but taking over. My first marriage ended because of her. She moved in with us temporarily and never left. Criticized everything Marcus did, spent money we didn't have, convinced me he wasn't good enough. By the time I realized what she was doing, he was gone. And you didn't learn from that?" She winced. I thought I had. I thought with James being successful, having his own money, his own family strength, it would be different. But she just got more creative. Used our success as a platform for her schemes. "Why didn't you warn James?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I thought I could manage her. Because..." She paused, then admitted, "because I was still trying to win her approval." Pathetic, right? A 40-year-old woman still trying to make mommy proud. "Not pathetic," I said, remembering my own father, dead 40 years but still echoing in my head sometimes. "Human. But now you know better." "Now I know better," she agreed. James appeared, looking haggard but somehow younger, like a weight had been lifted. "The garage is clear. All of Vivian's things are gone. She must have come back with a truck in the night." "Good riddance," Victoria said firmly, surprising us both with her vehemence. We spent the morning walking the beach, really talking for the first time in years. James told me about his struggles at the law firm, the pressure to make partner, the cases that kept him up at night. Victoria spoke about her own career, derailed by her mother's constant demands and dramas. They both talked about wanting children but being afraid of Vivian's influence. That's not a concern anymore, I pointed out. No, Victoria said, smiling genuinely for the first time since I'd met her. It's not. By noon, the story had broken online. Derek Ashworth's blog post was titled, "The Hamptons Grifter: How One Woman's Greed Destroyed Her Dynasty of Lies." It was actually more restrained than I'd expected, focusing on the fraud rather than personal attacks. Though he did include a particularly unflattering photo of Vivian mid-screech from the party. The Times and Wall Street Journal would run their pieces Monday, more focused on the financial fraud and the broader issue of elder financial abuse among the wealthy. Jennifer had called to interview me, and I'd given her enough quotes to paint a picture of a system where elderly parents were too often seen as ATMs rather than human beings deserving of respect. "You've started something," James said, reading over my shoulder. "This is going to be big." "Good. Maybe other families will have conversations before it gets to this point." Monday brought a storm, literally and figuratively. A nor'easter rolled in, trapping us all at the beach house while Vivian's world completely collapsed in the city. The country club formally expelled her. The Lexus was repossessed from a motel parking lot in Queens. 3 more people came forward claiming she'd taken money from them for various fake investments. Ben called with updates throughout the day. She's been served with 4 civil suits already. The district attorney's office is sniffing around. If anyone presses criminal charges, she's looking at serious time. Tell them I won't be pressing charges if she meets all the conditions we set, I said. I want her gone, not imprisoned. You're more generous than I would be, Ben said. I'm not generous. I'm practical. A criminal trial would drag James and Victoria through mud for years. This way, she disappears. Victoria spent the day on the phone with her therapist, then with lawyers, formally getting a restraining order against her mother. It was painful to watch, every conversation another nail in the coffin of their relationship. But she did it, tears streaming down her face but voice steady. I'm proud of you. I told her when she was done. I should have done this years ago, she said. Before she hurt Marcus. Before she hurt you. Before she hurt us. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, I quoted. The second best time is now. That evening, as the storm raged outside, we played Scrabble, something Margaret and I used to do with James every Friday night when he was young. Victoria was terrible at it but laughed at her mistakes. James was still competitive as ever. I beat them both, but not by as much as I could have. You let us get close, James accused, smiling. Prove it, I challenged, winking. It was the first normal family evening we'd had in years. Tuesday, the storm cleared, and with it, the last of Vivian's presence in our lives. She'd fled to Florida, according to Ben's sources, staying with a cousin who didn't yet know about the scandal. It wouldn't last. Nothing with Vivian ever did. But something else was beginning. James took the rest of the week off. The first vacation he'd taken in 2 years. Victoria did the same. We spent the days fixing things around the house that had been neglected, not because I couldn't afford professionals but because there was something healing in working with our hands together. James replaced boards on the deck, remembering as he did how he'd helped me build it when he was 15. Victoria painted the guest bedroom, choosing the same soft blue Margaret had originally picked. I supervised from my chair, offering suggestions they sometimes took and sometimes gently ignored. This is nice, Victoria said one evening, paint in her hair, dirt under James's nails, all of us exhausted but content. This feels like family. This is family, I corrected. On Saturday, a week after the confrontation, we held a different kind of gathering at the beach house. James had invited his colleagues, young lawyers who'd only known him as the stressed, perpetually worried senior associate who never said no to anyone. Victoria brought friends from her book club, women who'd watched her cancel plans whenever her mother demanded attention. This time, the party was simple. Barbecue on the deck, beer in coolers, children playing in the sand while their parents relaxed. No pretension, no performance, just people enjoying a beautiful day by the ocean. "Your house is amazing, Mr. Morrison," one of James's colleagues said. James never mentioned it was this spectacular. James never mentioned a lot of things, I replied, watching my son flip burgers with newfound confidence. "He's been too busy trying to be what everyone else wanted him to be." The young man looked confused, but I didn't elaborate. Some lessons had to be learned, not taught. As the sun set, I found myself sitting with Mrs. Pemberton, who'd asked to come by to apologize for her part in the previous week's drama. "I should have known Vivian was trouble," she said. There were so many red flags. "We all see what we want to see," I replied. "The question is what we do when the truth becomes unavoidable." "You handled it brilliantly. Ruthlessly, but brilliantly. I did what needed to be done. No more, no less." She studied me. "You know, Theodore, I never understood why Margaret married you. You seemed so different. She was all warmth and kindness, you were all business and strategy. But now I see it. You protected her from the ugliness so she could remain kind. And now you're protecting James the same way." I thought about that as the party wound down. Maybe she was right. Maybe my role had always been to be the bad guy when needed, so the people I loved could remain good. Later, after everyone had gone, James found me on the deck. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said. About conditions for the inheritance. And I don't want to wait. Victoria and I want to start therapy now. We want to have kids, but we want to be better than we have been. We want to break the cycle." "Good," I said simply. "And I want to learn from you. Really learn. Not just about business or property, but about standing up for what matters. About being the kind of man who protects his family instead of hiding from conflict. That's a harder lesson than you think," I warned. "I know. But I'm ready to learn." 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom in Manhattan. Not as a defendant or plaintiff, but as a witness. Vivian had been arrested in Florida for running the same scam on a retirement community, claiming to be a wealthy investor, taking deposits for a fictional development. This time, her victims were genuinely elderly, genuinely vulnerable, and the state of Florida didn't share my reluctance to prosecute. They'd asked me to testify about her pattern of behavior. James and Victoria sat in the gallery, there to support me but also to face Vivian one last time. She looked different. Jail didn't suit her. Her hair was gray at the roots, her nails broken, her designer clothes replaced with a public defender's courtroom special. When she saw us, something flickered in her eyes. Hope? Regret? Anger? It passed too quickly to tell. I testified simply and factually. No embellishment, no drama. Just the truth about what she'd done, what she'd taken, how she'd operated. The prosecutor thanked me. The public defender declined to cross-examine. As I stepped down, I passed Vivian's table. She whispered, "You destroyed me." I paused, looked at her directly. "No, Vivian. You destroyed yourself. I just turned on the lights." She was convicted on all counts. 7 to 10 years, with possibility of parole in 5. Victoria cried when the verdict was read, not from sadness, but from relief. It was over. Really over. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. They wanted a statement, a sound bite for the evening news. I gave them one. Elder abuse comes in many forms. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes financial, sometimes emotional. But it all stems from the same source, a lack of respect for the wisdom and dignity of age. I hope this case reminds people that growing old doesn't mean growing weak. We've simply learned to choose our battles more carefully. The story ran nationally. I received hundreds of letters from elderly parents facing similar situations. Ben helped me set up a foundation, the Margaret Morrison Fund for Elder Dignity, to provide legal resources for those who couldn't afford to fight back like I had. James took a leave of absence from his firm to help run it. "I want to do something that matters," he said. "Something Mom would have been proud of." Victoria joined the board, using her legal expertise to help families identify and document financial elder abuse. Together, they turned our personal nightmare into something that could help others. Spring came early the next year. I stood in the garden of the beach house, watching James and Victoria plant roses where Vivian had tried to install an ostentatious fountain. Victoria was 6 months pregnant, glowing in the morning sun. James had quit the corporate law firm entirely, opening a small practice in Montauk specializing in elder law and estate planning. "These were Mom's favorites," James said, carefully placing a yellow rose bush in the prepared soil. "Golden celebration, right?" "She planted one every anniversary," I confirmed. "Said they reminded her that every year together was golden." Victoria wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of dirt. "Ted, have you thought about names? For the baby?" "That's your decision," I said. "We were thinking Margaret for a girl," James said. "Maggie for short." I had to turn away, ostensibly to check on the other plants, but really to compose myself. She would have liked that. "And for a boy," Victoria added, "Theodore." "Theo. Now that's just asking for trouble," I said, but I was smiling. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, 3 generations, counting the one on the way, rebuilding what had been damaged. The house felt alive again, filled with purpose and possibility. That afternoon, Ben arrived with papers for me to sign. The Beach House Trust was being modified. It would pass to James and Victoria as planned, but with provisions for it to remain in the family for generations. No quick sales, no outside investors, no schemes. Just a place for family to gather, to grow, to remember what mattered. "You've thought of everything," Ben said admiringly. "I've had time to think," I replied. "And excellent teachers in what not to do." As the sun set, we sat on the deck, the same deck where this all started, where Vivian had strutted like she owned the place, where James had found his courage, where Victoria had chosen her husband over her mother. "I have something to tell you both," I said. "Dr. Patterson ran some tests last week. The heart condition Margaret had, it's starting to show up in me. It's early, manageable with medication, but it's there." James started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not telling you this for pity or panic. I'm telling you because I want us to be honest with each other from now on. No more secrets, no more suffering in silence, no more letting problems fester until they explode." "How long?" Victoria asked quietly. "Years, probably. Maybe a decade if I'm careful. Long enough to meet my grandchild, maybe see them start school, possibly even longer. The point is, we don't know. We never know." Margaret thought she had forever, and she got 12 years less than she deserved. Vivian thought she'd conquered the world, and now she's in prison. I looked at them both, my son who'd found his strength, his wife who'd found her voice. All we have is now. This moment. This family. This home. And the choice to protect it or let it be taken from us. 5 years have passed since that night Vivian called me a lazy old man. I'm 78 now, moving slower but still moving. The heart medication keeps me stable. The beach house stands stronger than ever, filled with the laughter of my grandson Theo, who just turned 4 and has his grandmother's eyes and his grandfather's stubborn streak. Vivian was released on parole last month. Victoria received a letter from her, not an apology exactly, but an acknowledgement of wrongs done. They didn't reconcile, but Victoria sent back a photo of Theo. Sometimes that's all the forgiveness we can manage, and that's okay. James's elder law practice has become the most respected on Long Island. He's helped dozens of families navigate the treacherous waters of inheritance, elder care, and family dynamics. His motto, painted on his office wall: "Respect is not inherited. It's earned and protected." The beach house hosts monthly gatherings now, not parties, just dinners where 3 or 4 families dealing with elder issues can come together, share stories, find support. Margaret would have loved it. She always said the house was too big for just us, that it should be filled with people and purpose. I'm writing this from my study, the same room where I confronted my family 5 years ago, where my father's trunk still sits in the corner, where the walls are now covered with photos of not just my family but all the families we've helped through the Morrison Fund. Yesterday, Theo asked me, "Grandpa, why did the mean lady try to take our house?" I thought carefully before answering. "Because she forgot that houses aren't just buildings, Theo. They're homes. And homes are made of love, not money. She tried to steal something that can't be stolen, family." He nodded solemnly, then ran off to play, satisfied with an answer he'll only understand years from now. This morning, I found James on the deck, watching the sunrise with his coffee, sitting in the same chair where I'd sat that morning after Vivian's invasion. "Dad," he said, "I never thanked you properly. Not just for saving the house or dealing with Vivian, but for showing me how to be a man. A real man, not just a successful one. You always were a good man." I told him. "You just forgot for a while. We all forget sometimes. What would Mom have done if she'd been here instead of you?" I laughed. "She would have handled it with more grace, less drama, and probably would have somehow made Vivian realize her errors and reform completely. Your mother had a gift for bringing out the best in people. You have a gift for revealing who people really are," James countered. "That's just as valuable." Maybe he's right. Maybe my role in this family story was to be the mirror that showed everyone their true selves: Vivian's greed, James's hidden strength, Victoria's suppressed voice, and my own need to be needed, to matter, to not be forgotten. The sun is setting now as I finish this story. I can hear Victoria calling Theo in for dinner. James is at the grill, burning hot dogs the way I taught him not to. The sound of waves mixes with laughter, and for a moment, I can almost feel Margaret beside me, approving of how it all turned out. Vivian was wrong about so many things, but most of all, she was wrong about this: I'm not a lazy old man with no fight left. I'm a father, a grandfather, a protector of what matters. The fight isn't gone, it's just focused now on things worth fighting for: family, dignity, truth, and the belief that age brings wisdom, not weakness. The beach house stands solid against the salt air and storms, just as it has for 35 years. It will stand long after I'm gone, a testament to the idea that some things can't be taken, only given. And what we choose to give, and to whom, defines not just our legacy but our lives. I gave my family a second chance. They gave me a reason to keep fighting. And together, we gave Vivian exactly what she deserved: a lesson in what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, silence for surrender, and age for irrelevance. The lazy old man won. And he didn't even have to get out of his chair to do it.